You know the chore. It is a cold Saturday, you have got a scraper in one hand and a wheelbarrow at the door. And the second you crack that coop open, the ammonia hits you in the eyes and the back of the throat. You shovel out the wet, packed muck from under the roost, you haul it off, you scrub the boards, you lay down a fresh bag of shavings, and your back aches the rest of the day. And you know the worst part. 2 weeks from now, you get to do the whole thing again. You are on a treadmill, scraping and buying and scraping and buying, and the coop never really stays clean anyway. Now here is the thing that ought to stop you cold. The old farmers never did that. Not once a month, not once a week. They cleaned the coop out about one time a year, and their birds came through the winter warmer and healthier than yours, and it cost them near about $2 a month to do it. They knew something the feed store will never put on a label, because there is no money in you not cleaning. We were taught that clean means scraped down to the bare wood. That is not clean. That is just empty. Stay with me, because in the middle of this, I am going to show you the one mistake that turns this into a stinking mess and makes folks quit. And I saved the best part of all, the part where your coop floor starts heating itself for free, for the very end. Before we go on, do me one small favor. Drop a comment and tell me what state you are keeping chickens in and how often you are cleaning out your coop right now. Just those two things. I read every one. My grandfather Walt ran cattle in southern Ohio, and my grandmother Ada kept the hens. And I will tell you what I never once saw as a boy. I never saw them shovel out that coop in the dead of winter. I am thinking of the winters around 1956. The floor of that hen house was deep, a foot of bedding and leaves and old chaff, packed down soft, and you could put your hand down near the bottom of it and feel it was warm. Not cold, warm, in January. And it did not stink. It smelt like the floor of the woods after a rain, earthy and alive. Once a year, come spring, my grandfather forked the bottom of it out onto the garden and started it over. That was the whole of the cleaning. I did not understand it then. I understand it now, and I am going to hand it to you. But first, let me put a number on what all that scraping is costing you, because it is more than your Saturday. There is the bedding you keep buying, a fresh bag every time you strip it bare. There is the bottle of coop cleaner and the deodorizer spray the store sells you, $18, $20, to fight a smell that should not be there in the first place. And then, when your bare scrubbed coop turns cold in the winter, there is the heat lamp you hang up to keep the birds from freezing, burning electricity every night and sitting there like a fire waiting to happen. Because a heat lamp in a dusty coop is exactly how good people lose their whole flock and their barn in one night. Add up the bedding, the sprays, the power and the labor, and scrubbing that coop bare is one of the most expensive habits in chicken keeping. And it is the one they taught you was responsible. Here is the hard truth in it. Every time you strip that floor down to the bare board, you are not just throwing out the mess. You are throwing out the good bacteria that were holding the smell down, throwing out the warmth, throwing out next year's garden, and then paying money to put a cold, dead, bare floor back in its place. You are working hard and paying twice to make the coop worse. That is the part that ought to bother you. Now let me take you back to that deep, warm floor, because to understand why it works, you have to throw out the idea you were handed. You were told the poop is the enemy, that it must come out. It is not the enemy. Handled right, it is the engine. What was happening on my grandmother's coop floor was the same slow, quiet work that happens on the floor of a forest or in a good compost pile out back. The droppings were not just sitting there rotting. They were breaking down, turning into dirt. And that is a thing that cannot happen on a bare scrub board. You scrape the floor clean and you throw the engine out with the muck every single time. Here is what is really going on, plain as I can say it. The name for it is the deep litter method, and the old poultrymen called it built-up litter. You start with a deep bed of dry carbon on the floor, wood shavings, dried leaves, a little straw. The birds drop their manure into it, and down in that deep, dry bedding, the good bacteria and the tiny life move in and go to work, the same as in any compost pile, eating that manure and turning it to soil right there under the birds. It comes down to a balance any gardener knows. The bedding is the brown, the dry carbon, and the manure is the green, the wet nitrogen. Get the two in balance and they do not rot. They compost. And there is a world of difference between the two. Rot is what stinks and breeds sickness. Composting is clean, and it is the oldest, quietest kind of work there is. That coop floor is just a compost pile that the chickens live on top of and feed all day long without trying. 3 things come out of it. It composts the smell away instead of letting it build, so a deep litter floor done right does not reek. It smells of clean earth. It generates a real gentle heat as it works. warming the coop from the floor up through the coldest months. And come spring, the bottom of it is finished compost, black gold for your garden. This is not some notion I cooked up on the porch. The Ohio Agricultural Experiment Station studied built-up litter back around 1948 and found that hens kept on a deep, worked litter floor were actually healthier than birds on a bare, scrubbed one, and that the litter itself grew good things the birds needed. The station proved on paper what my grandfather already knew with his bare hand in the cold. Now here is where most folks go wrong, and this is the part I promised you. This is why somebody hears deep litter, tries it, ends up with a wet, reeking, ammonia mess by December, and swears the whole thing is nonsense. Listen close, because it comes down to a few plain rules, and miss them and it turns on you. The first mistake is not starting deep enough. A thin sprinkle of shavings is not deep litter, it is just a dirty floor. You need a real depth. 4 to 6 inches to start, building toward a foot over the season. The second mistake, and this is the big one, is letting the manure outrun the bedding. The whole thing runs on balance. Manure is the wet and the bedding is the dry, and the dry has to stay ahead. So the rule is simple. When it starts to look damp, or when it starts to smell sharp in your nose, you do not clean it. You add a fresh layer of dry carbon right on top. Dry leaves, more shavings, a little straw. You feed the pile, you do not empty it. The third mistake is a closed up, damp coop with no air moving, because that pile needs to breathe, and moisture has to escape up and out. You want good ventilation up high without a cold draft blowing right on the birds. And the last one, do not ever use cedar shavings. The oils in cedar are hard on a bird's lungs. Pine shavings, leaves, and straw, those are your friends. Follow those, and your litter smells like a forest floor. Break them, and it smells like an outhouse. And that smell is the pile telling you it is too wet and needs more dry cover. So let me give you the whole method, layer by layer, so you can start this weekend. Number 1, start deep. Clean the coop out one last time down to the floor, then lay in a good 4 to 6 inches of dry bedding. Pine shavings and dried leaves are perfect together, and the leaves are free off your own yard. So rake them up in the fall and stack them by the coop, and you have got a whole winter of bedding for nothing. Straw works, and so does hemp bedding if you can get it, but stay away from cedar, and stay away from anything that stays damp. That deep first bed is your foundation, and you will keep building on it all winter until it is near a foot deep come February. Number 2, add. Do not strip. From here on, you are done shoveling. When you see damp spots or a bad smell starts creeping in, you toss a fresh layer of dry bedding right over the top, and you let the manure and the carbon build up together through the winter, deeper and deeper. Number 3, let the birds do the turning for you. A compost pile has to be stirred to work, but you do not have to do it. Throw a couple handfuls of scratch grain onto the litter of an evening, and the whole flock will dig and turn and mix that bedding for you all day long, chasing the grain. They do the labor, and they enjoy it. Number 4, the once-a-year clean-out. Come spring, you fork the deep bottom layer out onto your garden, where it is the finest compost you will ever spread. And here is the trick. You leave a few inches of the old worked litter right there on the floor when you start the new bed. The same as saving a bit of sourdough starter, because that old litter is full of the good life that kicks the new pile off fast. Now I know what some of you are thinking. My coop already stinks and the floor is already wet, it is too late for me this year. Or my coop is small and I do not see how this fits. Or I scrubbed the whole thing bare just last week. None of that shuts the door on you. If your litter is wet and sour right now, you do not need to start over, you need to bury it. Pile dry leaves and shavings on thick and get some air moving, and it will right itself in a week. If your coop is small, deep litter works just the same. You simply build a little shallower and clean a little sooner. And if you just scrubbed it bare, then you are standing at the perfect starting line. So lay in that first deep bed today and never scrub it bare again. And now the best part, the one I save for the end, because this is the part that turns a chore you hated into something that actually works for you. That deep litter floor is a furnace. As all that manure and bedding compost down underneath the birds, it throws off a steady, gentle heat, the same warmth you feel coming off a compost pile on a cold morning. A good deep litter floor can hold the chill off a coop through a hard freeze with no power at all, which means you can take down that heat lamp, that fire hazard hanging over your birds, and throw it away, and sleep easy knowing your coop is warming itself the way a forest floor stays warm under the snow. And you get paid twice, because that same floor that kept your hens warm all winter becomes a wheelbarrow full of the richest compost you can put on a garden come spring. Think on that. Chicken manure is about the hottest, strongest fertilizer there is. So strong that fresh out of the bird it will burn a plant right up. But a season down in that deep litter, composting slow and steady all winter, tames it into a black, crumbly, finished compost that your tomatoes and your beans will climb straight to heaven on. You would pay good money for a truckload of that at the garden center. Free heat in the winter, free food for your soil in the summer, out of the one thing you used to haul off and pay to be rid of. That is not a chore. That is a machine that runs on what you were throwing away, and it works while you sleep. So let me lay the whole thing out one more time, plain and in order. Start with a deep bed, 4 to 6 inches of pine shavings and dry leaves, never cedar. Stop shoveling, and instead add a fresh dry layer on top whenever it looks damp or smells sharp. Toss a little scratch grain on it so the birds turn it for you. Keep the air moving up high so the moisture can escape. And once a year in spring, fork the bottom onto your garden and leave a few inches behind to start the next bed. That is the entire thing. About $2 a month in bedding, no cleaner, no heat lamp, warmer birds, and black gold for the garden. You did not lose this because it stopped working. You lost it because there is no money in a coop that cleans itself and heats itself for free. Nobody sells you a bottle for that. They would rather you on the treadmill, buying bedding and sprays and heat lamps, scraping every other Saturday, believing the harder and more often you clean, the better a keeper you are. It was never true. You were not wrong to want a clean coop. You were just handed the hardest, costliest way to get one. Now you have got the old way back. So do 2 things for me before you go. First, go back to that comment box and tell me what state you are in and how often you clean your coop right now. I read every one, and sometimes your question turns into the next video. And second, if you would rather let the old ways do the work than pay a company to keep you busy, come along and sit on the fence with us. This is not about following a channel. It is a porch full of neighbors, remembering the old ways one at a time. Next time I am going to show you how the old farmers kept the water from freezing solid in the coop through the dead of winter with no heater and no electric at all. Just one thing set up the right way, because a flock can go a cold night without heat, but it cannot go a day without water. I will show you next time. Before I let you go, I think about my grandfather Walt in that hen house on a January morning, the birds warm on a floor that was quietly turning itself into next year's garden, and not a scraper in sight. He used to say, you do not fight nature, you get out of its way and let it do the work it was already trying to do. Keep it deep, keep it dry, and I will see you next time.